All right, welcome back. Prepping with Sarge. I did make it out to the Ashley River. I'll give you a little view here of where the water's at. So sometimes the water comes all the way up to there. As you can see, it's about medium tide right now. It is soupy here, guys. It is super hot, super soupy, really buggy. After like 6 weeks of no rainfall, we've been getting rain pretty much every day now. So it's been pretty brutal, but I'm going to give you my best. I always do. Let's see if we see anything interesting out here before we get started on the stream. We'll give people a chance to hop on in. I did start a little bit early today, but as you guys know, that's an interesting bug. What is that? If you guys can see this. I'm going to try to turn the camera. Hang on. Hey, Subair. See if you can see this bug down here. I'm going to try to point him out. Oh, man, he disappeared. No, I lost him. Okay. Let's see. This is really cool. See right about where my finger is there. He's huge. I have no idea what that is. Let's just hope he's not aggressive, doesn't sting or anything like that. All right, we'll get set up over here. We'll kind of, oh, this is interesting. Looks like some orange. Hey, Village Baby. Looks like some orange cones washed into the river here. Hope you guys can see that there. I know the kid. All right, see right in the center. I'll put it right in the center. Good to see you, Titan Preparedness. Definitely a lot of tide today, and it looks like because of the rain, it's washing in the other direction, which is really weird. Huh. All right, so I'm streaming from my phone. So if you guys see like that, sometimes when you guys post, thank you very much. When you guys post something that has something in there that I can't approve it through the phone. There's no way to do that. Another issue that I run into is I can't backtrack through this, or at least I haven't figured out how to do that into chat. But we're going to talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma, how it relates to things that a prepper may experience in terms of helping themselves and helping the people in their family and friends and in their mutual support groups. But while we're waiting to see if anybody else wants to pop in here, I'm going to go through a couple things. I am not a military or police sergeant. It is just a nickname. You guys know that if you've been with me for a while. I am, just to go through my credentials here before we start talking about mental health stuff, I am a licensed mental health therapist. I have been for over 20 years. I've worked in multiple states, all different populations, private sector, public sector. I've had private practice. I do consulting for people who are new to the field, who are working on their licensure. Worked with all different populations, everything you can imagine from, oh, we got some little crabs down here. Check this out. Hang on. This would be kind of interesting. All right, hang on. Hey, Sherry. All right, see if we can get them moving. They just, okay, you see that? See little crabs? I hope that's coming through on the camera. Hey, Urban Grandpa. So I've been in the field for a long time. I'm not, just speaking out of my backside here. Wow, there are a lot of crabs today. They are out hunting. Huh. And we're gonna talk about crisis and trauma and how that affects the brain, and then I'm gonna end today with some stuff on if you are the victim of the trauma, some self-care stuff you could do until you can get in with somebody for professional help if you need that, and also some stuff that you can do for a friend, family member if they're part of something, right? So this can be like trauma doesn't have to be like combat trauma, right? And I've certainly worked with my share of veterans who've had that. It can be a house fire where somebody loses their pet or a child, a horrible thing to go through. It can be a bad car accident. It can be witnessing to a murder. It can be a victim of domestic violence. It can be victim of childhood abuse. It can be victim of sexual assault. There's all different things. There's big traumas. There's little traumas. Most of us at some point in our life are going to experience at least some little traumas, right? So that could be losing a loved one. It can even be losing a pet. Sarge feels really strongly about my pets. They're my family. I'll defend my pets as much as I would defend anybody else in my family or friends. That they I'm not giving you guys the good views here. Hang on. There we go. So it can be any of the above, right? And what happens here, this is where we're going to get into the biology piece of this a little bit. And what happens here is trauma is processed a little bit differently in the brain. This is, I printed this out before I came out here. This is not my drawing, obviously. Let me give credit where credit's due. Here's the website where that came from. But I needed a picture of the brain to show you what happens here in the brain when somebody goes through a trauma. So this part up here, right, this is like the neocortex stuff. This is the higher brain, right? So everything that humans do with, like mathematics, sending people to the moon, our plans to send people to Mars, art, music, everything comes from, this upper, more evolved part of the brain. The brain stem area right here, this is more, sometimes it's called the reptilian brain, right? Sometimes it's more the older part of the brain, through evolution, it's the oldest part of the brain. Basically all mammals have something similar to this. It's your survival part of the brain. It's involved with fight, flight, and freeze responses. So what happens is most experiences in your life, you're going to process through your smell, sound, hearing, and then you're going to form a memory, and it's going to be kind of processed up in the higher brain. Trauma, what happens when you go through a trauma, when there's danger sensed, is this part of the brain takes over. And that's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. This is where you get your superhuman strength, right? This is your fight, flight, or freeze survival response. So if you're involved with something like, you're in a tornado and you see the roof collapse and it pins a loved one, you want this to kick in. Okay, if you are involved with a situation where a house fire and you need to get into a burning room to save your child, you want this part to kick in. Okay, because when the fight response kicks in, you become stronger, more resilient to pain. Your brain actually can process. Hey, Guns Coast to Coast. Your brain can actually process information a lot quicker. So that's why people will say it happened in slow motion, right? That's what's happening when this kicks in. And soldiers and police officers and first responders are trained to train out the flight and freeze response so they can just get into fight mode. Now it's not all perfect. Like you actually lose your finite motor skills to some extent, and there's ways you can kind of train that to improve too. And so what happens now, there's some side effects to this too, right? So after the trauma, after the crisis, whatever it is, there is some side effects. This part of the brain was not really meant to handle memory, and that's a big part of what happens. So your emotional crisis mind kicks in. It does what it needs to do to survive the situation, but then it sends it to the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is not really doesn't know what to do with those trauma images. Okay. All right, I'm gonna switch the camera in a second here. And if you guys have questions, kind of, if you could hold them to the end, because I'm just gonna kind of go on my spiel here and go try to get as much information to you as I can. Hey, SilverStacker, within 30 minutes, and then I'll try to leave a little bit of time at the end. So if you enjoy my content, if you enjoy my channel, please remember to give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. I am fighting for monetization. Those of you guys who are preppers, we the algorithm is not very kind to us sometimes. So I don't, believe it or not, my channel does not get shown to a lot of new eyes. And of the 1,300 subscribers that I got, most of them I recruited myself by talking to people from other channels. And I got a few boosts from people like, Morgan from Road Preparedness and Cliff from the Urban Prepper. But most of it was not from YouTube showing me to other people. So please give me that thumbs up. I appreciate it. Share it out if you find this content helpful. Let's go on. So what happens afterwards, right? The brain has got all this onslaught of information of, that whatever happened, whatever the bad thing is that happened. And it tries to figure out what to do with this. So it sends that up. And I'm going to use a metaphor here. This is not exactly how it works. Hey, America, Silver Patriot. This is not exactly how it works, but it's a metaphor to try to explain this in less than 30 minutes. Because really there are people who spend their whole career working with trauma, and hey Steve, at minimum this would be like an entire semester of coursework. So I can't give you all that. I'm going to give you some metaphors to simplify it for YouTube, and of course not medical advice. This is just, appreciate that. Thank you, Silver Scorpion. This is not medical advice. This is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any conditions. Just here to kind of give you guys some information that may be helpful if you're in a crisis, or a family member's in a crisis, or a friend is in a crisis. So it sends, okay, so it takes all that information of the bad thing that happened, and it sends it up to like, okay, now we have to store it, because everything you experience is stored, okay? Even like you're driving to work today, you're like, well, I don't remember what cars I passed or whatever. No, you don't, because it's filtered out to your subconscious, but it is stored somewhere. You just can't immediately access it. There's some, maybe some of that stuff plays out in dreams and subconscious and in meditation and hypnosis and things like that, but it is stored. And so the same thing happens with the trauma stuff, is it sends it up there to get stored, and the brain says, well, this is kind of weird, and this is the metaphor piece. Instead of like having a Polaroid of what happened, it has a Polaroid that's been cut up into a bunch of different pieces. That's what happens with a trauma memory. It's just a metaphor, but that's the best way I can explain it in a short period of time. So it takes a piece of this picture and it says, well, I know what burning things smell like. Let's put that over here next to this memory. I know what red looks like. Let's put it over here next to this memory. I know what screams sound like. Let's put it over here next to this memory. I know what loud bangs sound like. Let's put it over here next to this memory. Okay, and so it doesn't get stored correctly. And then, hey, Pennsylvania, thank you. And then, so that's part of what causes problems later on. So when people have re-experiences of a pretty little area over here, by the way, when people have bad experiences of, nightmares, flashbacks, being triggered into a panic attack, certain sounds, smells, things like that can trigger that, is because that part of the brain where it was stored is getting lit up, like think like a light switch lighting it up. Appreciate it. No problem. And so it's like for a moment, you're back in that situation, that trauma is real, whether it be in your nightmares or in your flashbacks. And not everybody gets those, right? But panic attacks, you're triggered, you don't even know the reason why, maybe. That's kind of the simplest way I can explain it, right? So how do we deal with this? Well, from a professional standpoint, there's a number of different ways we can treat this. I'm going to do that piece first, and then I'm going to go into like you as the lay person, you as the person who maybe has experienced this yourself, how to self-care until you can get some clinical help if you're going to do that, some things to avoid, and hey Mac, and ways that you might be able to help your loved one if they experience this. And some of this comes natural and some of it doesn't. But let's talk about the therapy piece of it first. So bear with me here. I'm going to pull out my notes. All right. So there is numerous ways that we can, in the mental health field, treat. I'm going to start walking back this way because that's going to take me out to the parking lot if I go that way. Treat a trauma. And not everybody with trauma has PTSD. Okay. So you can have you can just have trauma and not actually have a clinical diagnosis and still get some of the symptoms. There's another diagnosis that I use a lot called trauma and other stress-related disorders, which means you don't meet all the criteria for PTSD, but you've got some of the symptoms. So number one, if those of you guys who are military guys here, I see some of you in popping in and out of the channel, you probably, if you worked with the VA, you did something called prolonged exposure. Prolonged exposure in a nutshell is you're going to go through the narrative over and over and over again there's something that happens with when we talk about it or write it down, where that Polaroid that's been cut up into pieces is we start to glue those pieces back together, and we can look at the whole image. Steve, we can look at the whole image, and it's a bad thing, right? It's that bad thing. But we can look at it and we can start to say, okay, this really happened. I'm going to move towards place of acceptance. And so you have this horrible memory, but a horrible memory does not have the same effect on the body as a trauma memory, which is cut up into pieces. Okay. Again, that's the best metaphor I can use for this morning. So prolonged exposure, you go through it over and over again with a therapist, and they're going to keep asking you, how intense are your symptoms? We do that through a scale called Will Always Be With Me. Yeah, that's a Mac. That is a great way of saying it, and that's kind of the idea. If you're working with a therapist, is they're going to try to help you get to a place of radical acceptance, to be at peace with this bad thing. So the therapist with prolonged exposure is going to ask you questions about your symptom intensity. We do a scale. It's called SUDS, which is most of the time they're going to ask you on a scale of like 1 to 100 how intense is it as you talk about it. The more you talk about it, what we tend to find is that your symptom intensity will go down over time. Okay, next one is DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. Most therapists in the field will at least have some training in this nowadays. To get fully certified is a pretty intense process, but you don't have to be fully certified to use pieces and components of it. That's called DBT informed. And so what we do with that is we're going to teach you some different ways to manage your symptoms, anxiety, your agitation, your depression, hopelessness, all these things, and come up with ways for you to cope with them through distraction, through being able to sit there in the moment and not immediately go to a bad coping skill like drinking or drugs, and also to self-validate. Okay, that's my 3-minute explanation of that. Tfcbt is another one, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. A lot of times that's used with children who've been through trauma, but my experience is that you can adapt that to adults. Cognitive behavioral therapy is basically learning to work with your own thoughts and behaviors to come up with good coping skills and to self-validate, things like that. It's a different approach to some of the other stuff. A lot of these have similarities, and that's been my experience, 25 years in the field, that cognitive behavioral therapy was like the big groundbreaking thing back in the late 70s, 80s, and everything that's come after that is basically expanding off of that, if you want to kind of understand the evolution of therapy. Trauma-informed CBT, similar idea. Basically, it's using cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to work with the person around their trauma. I got 3 more here, and then I'm going to get to my self-care, and then if there's time, I'll take some questions. CPT is cognitive reprocessing therapy. I really like this one a lot. I went to a week-long intensive training on this one, and basically it's similar to trauma-focused CBT, except the idea, by the way, if you guys see a gator coming up behind me, just give me a warning. The idea here is that instead of a trauma narrative, you're going through the trauma impact statement. So it's more focused on the feeling and what kind of cognitive distortions you adapted to that feeling, right? So I'll give you an example. If you said, so let's say your trauma was you had a house fire and your child died in that house fire. Horrible, horrible thing to go through, right? One of the most unimaginable kinds of pain that a parent could go through. You would, thanks, Mac. I needed a little tension breaker there. Thank you. You would, we get, by the way, before I finish that statement, we therapists get our own vicarious traumatization. We develop our own skills for managing that. So please, if you do go to therapy, don't ever feel bad about talking to your therapist about it. We get our own peer help and self-help skills for managing that. But it is real. So if you see me get choked up when I talk about something like that, it's because I'm going to a place of something that I've worked with somebody in the past, and I just needed a minute to kind of process through that. So CPT takes that event, right? So the family went through the house fire, and the cognitive distortion that may come from that might be something like the person says, if I had gotten up earlier, my child would still be alive, right? Well, that's a cognitive distortion. There's a lot of what ifs in there, and it's a terrible, terrible thing that happened. But the truth is, it wasn't that person's fault. So we work with them around that distortion that comes from the emotion. Okay, that's CPT. I like it a lot. My plan is to get some more training in that one. All right, next one I am not trained in. It's called EMDR therapy. Now, for those of you who've been with me for a long time, when I had some other content on the channel, I did an interview with one of my friends who does EMDR therapy. I moved that over. I'm so sorry to hear that, Urban Grandpa. If you need some help, send me a message privately through businesswithsarge.com. I'll try to help you find somebody if you need that, okay? EMDR, my friend Jenny, I did an interview with her. Now I moved that video over to my mental health channel. So I'm going to go back later on today, and I'm going to link that and make a pinned comment so you can see what I'm talking about on that. It's speaking outside my wheelhouse. So it's a little hard for me to, I don't want to give bad information on that. I'd rather have you see her video where she talks about it. But EMDR therapy, in my opinion, if I can get the training on that, that is the quickest way for many, many people to get some symptom relief. The problem is, for me, the training is very, very expensive. It's very intensive. You have to basically be mentored by somebody else for like 50 hours of therapy. I'll post it in a pinned comment later, but it's health and mental health with Sarge. And there's not a lot of content over there right now because I'm focusing on this channel. My plan is once I get this channel rolling, I'm going to start releasing more mental health content over there. But there is some stuff over there on sleep disorders, how to help yourself with sleep disorders and panic attacks. So there's some pretty good content over there. It's just I've had to let that sit so I could try to get this channel going. All right, last one here, and this is going to lead me into how you can try to help other people in your family. This was one of the first ones that I trained on, which was basically a NOVA model, and it stands for National Organization of Victims Assistance. And years ago, and I'm talking like this was probably 20 years ago, I trained on this with a bunch of first responders. There was police, firefighters, EMTs in the room. And because, those are those of you guys who do that kind of work, you guys know you see some terrible, terrible things, right? Stuff that you probably can't talk about with your families. I know. The National Organizations of Victims Assistance, their model is this is one of the groups that will go in when there's a big, sorry, I saw movement. I'm going to get out from under that tree. I don't feel like having a snake follow me. The National Organization of Victims Assistance, this is one of the groups like Red Cross that will go in when there's a big event. Okay, like I'm talking like something that you're seeing on the national news, active shooter, something violent. So these are one of the groups that will go in, and basically it's like mental health first aid. And I know some of my viewers are being trained in mental health first aid because you've contacted me about that, which is great. The idea is if we can catch you immediately after you've seen or been victim of or witnessed to something really, really bad, we can do some damage mitigation. Oh yeah, man. I'm so sorry. That is horrible stuff to see. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, that would cause me to have some trauma symptoms trying stacking, but it would be, I guess the channel would get some good viral activity off of that. That's why I keep trying to see if I can catch a gator for you guys. I think that'd be kind of cool. I'll put it in the thumbnail if I do. I did catch some gators the other day. I don't know if you guys, those of you who are on Instagram, you might have saw those pictures, but I wasn't filming video at the time, unfortunately. So how do we do this damage mitigation? And this is the part that I want you to take away if you're a prepper, or you don't have to be a prepper. You're just here because you're interested in trauma. But let's say your family is victim to a tornado, a house fire, something really violent. The first thing you want to do is try to get that person talking, right? So tell me what you saw, tell me what you heard, tell me what you smelled, tell me what you were feeling, right? And you don't have to be a licensed therapist to do this. This is why it's taught to everybody as mental health first aid. This is something that you can do, and you can really make a big difference helping somebody out, limiting the really damaging effects afterwards. Okay, so you tell me what you saw, tell me what you heard, get them talking about it, a couple times if you can, because again, it's that putting that pieces of the cut up Polaroid together. Okay, you're putting a cohesive picture. It's a bad thing, and you're forcing them to, well, don't do that. You're helping them to look at it. You're helping them to look at it and make it a real image. That starts the process of radical acceptance. Okay. Validate, right? So that's the next piece of it. So it's allow them to ventilate, whatever they say. They could say, I was so mad I wanted to kill that person or whatever. That's okay. At that moment in time, you can assess if there really is a risk of that later on. But at that moment in time, let them vent whatever thoughts come to their head, because you're doing a lot of good by just getting those thoughts out of their head. And then reassure them that they're safe now, right? If they are, like, you shouldn't be doing this until it is safe. Make sure the scene is safe. Make sure they're in a safe place. Keep reassuring them that they're safe. Ask them what would help them to feel safer. For a child, maybe they want their favorite toy. Maybe they want their pet with them. Maybe an adult wants their pet with them. Maybe they want to talk to their loved one, right? Do the best you can to help them feel safe and secure, because that will also start to calm down those parts of the brain that are really lit up with that trauma. Okay. So ventilate, validate. I'm so sorry that you went through that. That was a horrible experience. That must have been so difficult to see that. I can't imagine what it well those were all validations, right? So you heard this horrible thing. Wow. All you just little statements like that, you're validating that it was real for them and that it was a bad thing. Um, the last part of that, sorry, the last part of that is prepare and predict. Okay, so you're going to help them to understand what could happen in the next couple days, couple weeks. So it's ventilate, validate. This is the easiest way to remember it. Ventilate, validate. I'm sorry, back up. Safety, security, ventilate, validate, and then prepare and predict. Okay, so prepare and predict. Let them know that it's normal that they may be more agitated, more sad, more anxious, more angry going forward, that they may have bad dreams, that they may feel like they don't want to be around certain people or places. They may not want to be around certain smells or sounds. Normalize it and help them to connect to something. If you feel or they feel like they're going to be in needing some extra help beyond that, try to help them connect to a licensed professional in your area, right? So by just doing that little debriefing there, you can really, as a layperson without any clinical training, you can do a ton of damage mitigation that will help to limit the big effects of trauma later on. Okay. That's like, as a prepper, I wish everybody had this as part of your skill set. Um, I mean, I can teach you foraging, I can teach you some medicinal plants, I can teach you some gardening. There's things I can't teach you well because I don't have the right training in them, like certain operational security things like that. I've had personal training, but I'm not trained as a trainer, so I can't. I leave those to other people like Steve, that's got the experience as being a trainer in that. And a lot of times when people ask me questions about that, try to send them to the right people. But this one here, mental health, just keep in mind those 6 words: safety, security. Hey, Jessica, safety, security, ventilate, validate, prepare, and predict. You do those 6 things as soon as it's safe to do so in the aftermath of a crisis event, a trauma, something violent, something bad. You can do a lot of help for people. Now, this is the last piece I'm going to end on, and then I'll take a couple questions, and then I got to get back to work. What if it's you? What if you're the person that's been through this horrible thing? Well, a lot of the same stuff applies. You really should not be trying to suppress that. I know it's when you go through. Everybody's going to have their crises and traumas in their life. I get it. It's really hard to talk about this stuff afterwards. You want to just shut it down and store it away into a compartment in your mind, but that's not the right thing to do. So talk about it with the people that you feel safe talking about that stuff with. And if it's real bad and you feel like you're going to have problems, anxiety, trauma triggers, agitation, avoidance. Yeah, and lay people in the ministries usually have some training on that stuff too. And I don't mind telling you guys, I've been to a couple different therapists in my life, and one of those was a minister and did fantastic work with me. Focus on the now, focus on today, absolutely. Living in the moment, right? Being mindful of your moment, grounding on what if you're safe, if you're in a safe place, what are what's around you right now? Can you listen to some music that helps you relax? Can you go outside and go for a walk like I'm doing? That kind of stuff. And then in the aftermath of that, if you've been through one of these horrible things, you really want to try to avoid substance abuse. You want to try to avoid even alcohol, even marijuana. Cigarettes, probably it's not going to do any effect on it. But the problem with those other drugs is they inhibit that. Go back to that metaphor of the cut up Polaroid. They inhibit the ability of that Polaroid to be put back together in a cohesive way. And in the beginning, drugs will help you feel better. Hey, how's it going, Adrian and Nico? It's good to see you. They'll blunt those symptoms for a while, right? We know that. We know that. And I could tell you which ones to do it the best, but I'm not going to do that. But it's a temporary thing, and you're going to need more and more of those things to blunt those symptoms, to prevent the nightmares, the flashbacks, the panic attacks, the rage. So that's not going to help you in the long term. So you really want to try to avoid those things and deal with it in better, healthier ways. You're very, very welcome, Jessica. So let's say you've had a small trauma, right? Like maybe we'll say bad car accident, nobody died, you had a bad injury, but it's still going to cause some after effects. Maybe you're going to be nervous being in the car. Maybe certain parts of town you're going to be nervous in, whatever. So maybe that's something you can treat by yourself, because you're not getting the real intense stuff. And how are you going to do that? Well, you should be talking about it with somebody that you love and trust, and try to visualize that. So if you're worried about driving again, try to visualize yourself driving, and then try to take it slowly doing some of that real life exposure back to the trigger. Right. That's from that. Again, I'm talking just about the minor stuff, not stuff that, like, everybody's going to have some of that. Most of us are going to have a car accident or something like that. And you don't necessarily always, some people might need to go to therapy for that, but a lot of people might not. And so there are some ways, stay away from the booze. You might be more tempted to do that. They're definitely not. They're definitely not. And, I'm not, you guys know, I've talked about that before. I'm not opposed to, a nice glass of bourbon or a cold beer or whatever, but it's, it does have some problems when you're in the aftermath of a trauma. And that's how, and a lot of times also, it's the same idea with how a person gets addicted to pain pills. Is a lot of times they'll have some kind of physical injury going on, and so they'll take some medication and it makes it feel better, right? And that's how that starts. And it's kind of the same idea with substance abuse and trauma. Is like a person has a few beers or something, illegal or whatever, and it makes it feel better for a little while. But in the long run, that's not going to help you. It's gonna actually take everything away. Hey, Angie, it's good to see you. And make sure try to do stuff that helps heal your soul, heal your mind. I love getting out in the wilderness. I love playing in my garden. I love listening to music. I love playing video games. You can do some indoor stuff too. You can grab a book and read, but definitely be talking to people. That's probably the most critical piece of it. All right. Wow, it is getting hot. If you guys get any questions, I'll do my best to try to help you. Just keep in mind that this is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any condition. I'm not here to be your therapist. I'm here to give you a little bit of tips so that you can be your own self-help guru and maybe help somebody else if they go through something bad. But I'll try to answer basically generic questions about trauma if you've got any. And if you haven't already done so, really appreciate a thumbs up. I only have asked people to share videos 2 or 3 times in the 200 plus videos I've released. Yeah, and I didn't even get into that too much today, but that's sometimes, especially for us guys, because we're taught. I'm just stereotyping here a little bit, but we're taught to turn tears to anger, because anger can be more useful in the moment, but that can also do a great disservice to us later on in life. And it can be really easy for us to flip to rage, which can be dangerous and burn a lot of bridges for us. So if you're prone to that, definitely, and go, you want to get some help before it becomes that. Good job, Sherry. I love to see that. That is awesome. That is awesome. Acceptance of what happened is the first thing. It definitely does. It definitely does. That's the idea of the radical acceptance. Is this. That's good insight, though, Sherry. I mean, we've all wasted years on behaviors that we shouldn't have done. I can say that too. Um, don't look at it that way, is what I would say to you. Look at it as those gave you the growth to get you to the point where you're at today, right? So everything in life is gets us to the next point in life where we can maybe do some good with it, even the bad stuff. And that's a good reframe for trauma too. Like, even with bad stuff, even with your trauma can make you stronger in a lot of ways, and it can prepare you to help other people. Hey, Bend and Stretch with Sue. Appreciate you being here. And so going back to what I was saying, I don't usually ask people to share my content. I think I've only done it like 3 times in the 200 videos that I've done. If you know somebody that would benefit from this, please go ahead and share it. Dad drank, we hid. Oh man, that sounds like you had it pretty rough. But look at the strength that came out of that too, is that you helped to take care of your siblings. At least they had you. Anybody have any questions about any of that stuff? The easiest way to, if you know somebody that needs help, sorry, I'm back near the parking lot. If you know somebody that needs help, the easiest way to find help is go into your Google and search for life saved you from yourself. I think there's a lot of people in this chat, and that's probably true for Urban Grandpa. They have they have a way of doing that for us. Easiest way to find help if you guys want to get some help is go on Google and search for search for mental health center in your area, right? So look up, let's say if you were in Cleveland, Ohio, just do Cleveland Mental Health Center. Most places, that's a good starting point. You don't have to go to the local mental health center. It's just, a lot of times it's the first option. You can go to a private practice person. You can go to a trained minister. You can go to a peer support specialist. There's some great programs across the country where people who have been through their own experiences, be it trauma, another type of mental health issue, substance abuse, they get trained on how to help other people. Those are great programs. I think the VA has some programs like that too. Those are awesome, like really, really cool. I encourage people to check those out. You're very welcome, Urban Grandpa. Thank you for joining in. All right, anybody else have any other questions? I better get back to work. I'm sure there's stuff waiting for me there. I'll give you guys a couple seconds here. Please remember to check out each other's channels, give each other support. That's one of the great things about YouTube is it's not just a search engine. It's not just an entertainment platform. It is a social media platform. So help each other out, support each other, get to know each other. There's great people in this chat. I appreciate everybody. Keep planting your seeds. Keep stacking your silver. This is Prepping with Sarge.